Our next presenter is Matt Fisk. He was introduced to us by Tom, who helped us organize this. Thank you, Tom. And he is presenting from Lancer Legacy Ranch in Maud, Texas, where we were all supposed to be at today, but we're not. And his presentation today is called Taming Trauma, the Art of Telling Your Story. Go for it, Matt.
Thank you very much. And we're coming to you live and in Technicolor from Lancer Legacy Ranch. I used to do a radio show, and I was known as the Mad Captain. That was my rank when I got out of the Army. I started as a private first class way back in 1997. I went into basic. I had broken my glasses, and I was too poor to get a new pair. So I showed up just like this, and they found out that I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. So they got me a new pair of glasses, and we had this drill sergeant. He was German, and he just took a dislike to me, I guess. When he found out I got the brand new glasses and I wasn't wearing them, he said, "Fisk, put the glasses on." Okay, drill sergeant. These are the ones that they gave me, the ye old BCGs. And I put them on. He said, "Fisk, you got a girlfriend?" "No, drill sergeant, I didn't think so. You're ugly." Anyway, you guys probably recognize the veterans out there. I guess basic was probably pretty much the same for everybody everywhere. But I did back in 1997, Fort Benning, Georgia, as an infantry guy. I did 8 years with 2 deployments during that time. And then I crossed over to the dark side and became an officer, and probably the worst officer that the Army ever spawned. I ended up in logistics. I could not stand it. And so I was miserable each and every day. So I'm going to wear these BCGs throughout the rest of the presentation, just so you guys know I don't take this too seriously. And I really think that that is a great attitude to approach this with. Just don't take yourself serious. Relax, breathe, have a good time. We're going to be talking about some very difficult things. Trauma. That is the operative word in post-traumatic stress disorder, as I'm sure you all are aware. Now, there may be some civilians listening in now, and perhaps later, since this is recorded for posterity. And although I'm going to be focusing on how a veteran can take a traumatic combat event and get it out into a public space where it no longer is so scary, I want you to know as a civilian that this is just as much for you as well. It's been my experience. Well, statistically speaking, 80% of Americans, this is from the Centers for PTSD, 80% of Americans will experience trauma, a traumatic event in their life. That's something so bad, you think about it all the time, and it just enters into your every aspect of your life. And 20% of those people are going to get PTSD from it. So this is not an Army phenomenon or a military phenomenon or something solely acquired through combat. So if you have a traumatic event in your life, regardless of your background, then this presentation can probably be something for you to take with you. Now, we are going to start. I'm going to walk you through my story, and this book here I wrote and actually published back in 2016, and it was subsequently used to help build this script for a National Geographic miniseries, 8 parts, called The Long Road Home. That's why you'll see on there a endorsement from Miko Alon, who was the screenwriter, one of the screenwriters and the producer of The Long Road Home. So pretty good guy, and actually he had a big impact upon how this book came about. So I want to walk you through step by step from the beginning, go through the event itself, and then show you the process of how that trauma entered into my life, what I did with it, how I shaped it into a narrative. And if you want to just write something purely for yourself, that's fine. If you're looking to take your story and get it out into book form, then we're going to go a little bit further in that direction. And if you're interested in taking it even further to the big screen, I have some advice for that as well. Okay. So with that said, let's begin. Now, we were just the men in this story, just regular infantry guys. You know, you have the Delta Force, you got your Navy SEALs, your Green Berets, your Ranger Force Recon, but we're just your garden variety infantry soldiers. And in case you feel left out, we also have National Guard and Air Force as well. But anyway, we're just ordinary, average guys doing a job in Sadr City back in 2004, right after the end of conflict. And we were there to win hearts and minds and help the nation of Iraq recover and get back on their feet as an independent nation. So the mission of the 1st Cavalry Division, 2-5 Cav, that's who we were, was in Sadr City. And just to give you an idea, there it is there, northeast of the green zone in Baghdad, nice square shape, housing predominantly Shia, although there were a few Kurds in the southwest. To put it in perspective, this is an exact scale of Mount Pleasant, Texas, population approximately 40,000 people. Sadr City had 2.5 million crammed into that little square space there, mostly kids and a lot of high-rise buildings and laid out like a grid, but not with all the accoutrement of a modern city. It was very, very, well, just take a look here. This is what we saw on our first day. We caravanned up from Kuwait, drove all the way up. We actually lost a soldier on the way through a vehicle rollover. So that actually started out pretty bad. We showed up at the FOB, an old Iraqi army base. It was pretty small, but it housed our battalion task force Lancer. You'll probably recognize that from our name, Lancer Legacy Ranch. More on that in a minute. But anyway, yeah, this is what we saw. It's horrible, horrible. Just sewage everywhere and garbage and rats and goats and children living in just horrible conditions and vehicles everywhere. Man, just crowded city. But for all that, we didn't really expect much activity. There had been very little in the way of hostile actions in the sector. So they said, you guys are going to the safest spot in Iraq. Actually, that turned out to be a bit of an exaggeration. This is Sadr City before the bombardment. That building you see on the corner there has actually been reduced to quite a bit of rubble, but it was the government center. And looking straight up into the city there, this is Route Delta, as we called it. I believe the Iraqis called it Chawadar Street, and it houses the Sadr Bureau. That's a group of people who fell in with Muqtada al-Sadr. That's him right there, Mr. Grumpy Pants. And I guess every good story needs a antagonist, and that would be him, Muqtada al-Sadr. He's actually on the governing council for Iraq right now. His party is leading Iraq. So our first day, we woke up and did a lot of sightseeing in the city, finding out where we're going to be helping out at this. We were responsible for a maternity clinic, for a police clinic. That's my old buddy, Shane Aguero, having tea with the sheikhs we ran across. Overall, the city was just pretty chill. However, the next day, we began to see a little bit of pushback. On the left-hand side, you see a crowd of about 10,000 people, adherents to what is called the Mahdi militia. They were loyal to Muqtada al-Sadr. And these are actually all pictures from that day. You'll see in the top right corner, squad leader, Staff Sergeant York, who's a major now. He he's from Texas, a good Texas boy, and taught them Iraqi boys how to hook 'em horns. Well, y'all can blame him for that. I'm not a Longhorn fan, so don't hold it against me. So anyway, April 4th, 2004, day which will live in infamy. We had a mission to go out, and we actually came to this spot, and our job was to suck up all of that standing raw sewage that you see there. That's not a rain puddle. That is from the sewer system. Yuck. So we're doing that, and as we are guarding the civilian contractors who are doing it, they suddenly pull up. Oh, before I get that much further, the way we were arranged in our convoy, this is one platoon, 4 Humvees, 1 armored Humvee front and rear, and 2 in the middle, which were pretty much open air. That's exactly what they look like there in the middle. I think that's Private Rush or something. But anyway, we crowded dismounts into the back of those vehicles. So all in all, about 24, 25, depending on how tight we wanted to pack them. But that particular day, that's everybody that was originally with us. So yeah, lots of, there they are. Oh my goodness, what a horrible job. And it smelt just as good as you would imagine. So anyway, the sewage workers suddenly pick up and haul through the city. We race to catch them, putting our Humvees on 2 wheels, hither, thither, and yon, and finally catch up to them. I've never seen anyone in my life look as terrified as that Iraqi worker did. Said he'd been threatened that if they worked with coalition forces, they'd be killed. So we said, all right, if you want to quit, we'll escort you down south to the city. You can dump your load out there. Basically, all they were doing was just dumping it into a soccer field, which is great. But anyway, they did that. We head back. A couple other things happened after that that don't bear repeating. And we had a call to go up Route Delta on our way home. There had been a lot of activity reported, and we were supposed to get a handle on it. So as we turn north onto that red line there, we noticed that every car inside our city seemed to be leaving, seemed to be getting out of Dodge, which caused us great alarm. As we got further north along the way and passed by the Sadr Bureau, we spotted about 300 men who looked like they had been caught with their hand in the cookie jar. All of a sudden, they just scattered. We got maybe, you can see how far past the Sadr Bureau, there's a little monument to McDonald Sadr's uncle. Got just a little bit past there and made first contact. So right there, and actually know the name of the guy who did it. Intel found out about it later. But our convoy, we got separated. We punched through the ambush, but they had put all of these obstacles in our path, flaming tires and refrigerators and cars and everything else. Well, I was in the lead vehicle with the LT, and the driver was just on it. And plus he had all that armor on his vehicle, and we made it through. We didn't realize till later that we left everybody behind because our mirrors got shot out and we couldn't look behind us. And actually those soft skin vehicles, one of them fetched up on a pile of bricks and was immobilized. The one behind it tried to push him off. His transmission dropped out while doing so. And so things were starting to get pretty bad. And to make matters worse, when we finally realized that we had been separated, we stopped. And it was at that moment that our gunner, Sergeant Eddie Chin, was killed. So the lieutenant made the call to go back and connect up with everybody else to see what was happening. And so we did. When we got back, we linked up with everybody else, found out that we were combat ineffective, and the LT and the platoon sergeant decided to hold up in the nearest alleyway and wait for help, which is exactly what we did. And that is the precise alleyway with now our remaining vehicles pulling security on both directions, and our dismounts took over a building so that we could have, some sort of advantage to keep keep the heat off. Our lieutenant got hit with a couple of grenades there, and they tried to rush our position for both ends. You're talking, well, you seen the mob of about 10,000. I think about 1,000 were at our location trying to get into us, and it was very, very bad time. So anyway, these are actual pictures from the rooftop. The guys up there, I guess, took a moment to go Hollywood on me. Top left is Ben Hayhurst. He had been shot in the shoulder. And that's Eric Berkwin, bottom left, Taylor, top right, and then Doc Guzman on the bottom right. Just making the best of it. You know, really, at the end of the day, when you're in a situation like that, what else are you going to do? So, as it turned out, we were not the heroes in this particular tale. My heroes were these guys right here. The rest of our battalion, men mostly I had never met before, jumped in the back of vehicles just like that. And this shot was taken by an Iraqi and later put online. That's actually when this happened. So there they are riding to our rescue, but they did not know that they were riding into an ambush. And so they went through all these streets with tall buildings with people shooting down at them, and they just got chewed up. By the time it was all said and done, we took, I think, 72 casualties that had to be evacuated back to the United States. It's a pretty bad fight. But also one of my heroes is the tank company from the unit we were replacing. These aren't first cav guys, the second ACR, but they were the last unit left, the last combat unit left from the battalion or regiment we were replacing. If you think you've ever had the green weenie before, these guys have had it greener and they've had it weenier. It's most of their unit was already on the plane in the sky heading back to Washington State, and when all this cooked off, they were ordered to turn back around, and they fought another 3 months after that. Well, anyway, that tank company that was still there, they were down in between the green zone and Sadr City, and they come rushing back up to our defense. Our battalion had tried twice to get into our position to extract us, and were repelled both times. Just the contact was just way too heavy. But these tanks, as armored as they were, they punched a hole right through that city. It still felt to this day. Unfortunately, on the way, they lost one of theirs, Sergeant Michael Mitchell. So, and also from our battalion, these fine Americans also lost their life as well. So, no telling how many enemy lay in the dirt by the time we got done, but it was one heck of a fight that that has affected us to this day. So, and there's my old gunner, Sergeant E.G. Chen. Quite literally took my place. So, I want to talk about this. Now that we've got through that particular event, it's important that you know that this happened, because as I walk through the rest of the writing process, you need to know what was going through my mind as this was taking shape. Because if you're going to try to address trauma in your life, particularly trauma from combat, but trauma is trauma, you have to recognize that it is going to affect you when you try to pull it out. Most people try, or they use the tactic of avoidance to deal with things. You bury it with enough alcohol or drugs or whatever else, and until you no longer think about it. The problem with that is that your well is still poisoned by the things you've experienced back then. You're just ignoring it. I believe that writing through this, bringing it out into the light, putting it down on paper is a very powerful therapeutic tool. But I will warn you, man, it's not pretty. I started to write, let's see, I think 2006 was the first time I tried to put pen to paper. But before I talk about all that, here's something I didn't do that you should begin with. I want you to take a strong look at your support network. Your family, are you close to your family? Do you have close friends? Is there a pastor in your life that you can talk to? Is there a mental health counselor? Perhaps you're already seeking counseling for certain events. You need to take a look at those folks in your life who can be a support to you when you start bringing all of this ugliness out into the light. Make sure before you start that network is in place. You've identified those key individuals that can help you. Okay. Now, who are you writing this for? Is this going to be a part of your memoirs that you pass down, or are you just doing this as therapy and you don't want anybody else to see it? Maybe you want your family or your friends to know what you went through, so maybe it might bring a bit more understanding. It might surprise you, even to this day, as much as PTSD has been talked about, I still find that a lot of civilians don't really get it. They don't understand why a soldier could have experienced something 10 years ago, and why haven't you got over it yet? Why does this still bother you? Well, as it turns out, there's a pretty good reason, but unless you really understood it and walked through it, it's very hard to grasp. But anyway, figure out who this is for. Maybe you're going to write it for your kids or your grandkids, or perhaps a larger audience. Maybe you're looking to publish, but you need to figure that out at the outset. That's going to determine how much effort you put into it, and what your result will be. Now, give yourself lots of time to do this. I told you that I published that book in 2016. And yes, you heard correctly. I first started writing it back in 2006. It's a long time. Why? Well, because as I wrote, I could only write maybe 2 or 3 pages at a time before I was having panic attacks, and I was shutting down and everything else. And I might have to wait another week before I would even try to get back into it. It was tough. And I tell you, you have to have a good reason for doing it before you start, or you just never will. You'll hit that first bit of panic and decide, well, this is just not for me. But be realistic about it. It's tough. Give yourself time. In other words, don't sign a contract where you have 6 months to write the book about your life, when it might take you 6 years to do it. I'll just go ahead and start the writing first and worry about the rest of that later. Now, also find you a mentor, someone who can not only help you with the writing process, perhaps also the effects that writing might be having on you. In my case, I was very fortunate to hear about veteranswriting.org, the Veterans Writing Project. I strongly encourage you to look those folks up and seek out their help as a mentor. I did, and they gave me a nice professor up in Michigan State, who's a friend to this day. I'll talk more about her in just a minute. But find someone who knows how to write and perhaps understands PTSD. And if you get both, wow, awesome. And I began with the research. I wish I'd had more strategy involved when I began the process. But I just kind of jumped straight into the research because I'd seen a lot of media in our area of operations after this event happened, and I knew somebody was going to write the story. And so I thought it would be better if it was written by someone who was there on the ground. You may have read Black Hawk Down by Mark Bowden. It's a fantastic look at that particular battle in Somalia. But Mark Bowden was not there. He simply wrote from interviews that he had conducted. Now, I began interviewing people for this book maybe 3 months after it happened, while we were still in Iraq. Had just a little tape recorder that in between missions, or sometimes during missions, sometimes you can actually hear us exchanging fire as I'm talking to people. But it was important that I do that. And as it turned out, there's a very good reason for doing this. Trauma affects the brain in a way that's, I don't know, it takes a lot from you. Even though I began the interview process 3 months after this happened, and we're still in contact, that everything is still fresh, you'd be amazed how people's perspectives can differ. In other words, I would talk to 3 different people that were there at the same time, saw the same thing, and they had 3 completely different takes on it. And I'm so glad that I did this, because now I talk to these same guys, and we're 14, 15 years after the fact. Some of these guys have traumatic brain injury so severe that they don't remember anything that happened back then. Most of them try hard not to think about it. So all of that would have been lost had I not done it as close to the event as possible. So I would recommend, if you're researching to write about this event, that you, as soon as you can, get to the people who have the knowledge of events that you need, and get it on recording as soon as possible. You also need to verify the information, because this may surprise some of you, but people lie, even veterans. I know that's shocking, isn't it? But you need to verify the information that's given to you. I said that some people gave the different accounts of what happened. Some of that was because that they didn't want to face what they had actually done, and some of it was just because of the fog of war, and maybe they just forgot. But you need to verify what's told to you, and not just take it as gospel that yes, this happened. Now, this is going to save you a potentially expensive lawsuit down the road should you have inadvertently defamed someone. You also, as Tom had mentioned earlier, you get your terminology straight. He had talked about it had been so long since he'd been on a helicopter that the specs kind of escaped him. Well, even 8 or 9 years after the fact, that there were some things that I was fuzzy on. I couldn't remember this terminology or that terminology for the particular nomenclature of the vehicle or the weapon system or whatever. And things just leave you. I would also encourage you to diagram, create sketches, and if possible, even terrain models of the event. Why is this important? Well, in my particular case, I only had a certain vantage point of the battlefield. And generally speaking, that was right over the top of my gun on top of a Humvee. And I didn't see what happened on the rooftop. I didn't see what the other vehicle behind me was doing, really. So I was dependent upon all the different input from the interviews. And one thing I've learned about that is when you have 18 different points of view on one battle space, man, it gets confusing. So I found it very useful to draw sketches or overlays on the satellite imagery, and then try to place where these people said they were to see if that made sense. And that actually helped it, I guess, gel in my mind about what was happening. That way, when I began to put it on paper, I had greater confidence that what I was writing was the absolute truth. I would also tell you that to the greatest degree possible, digitize everything. You may have written copies are fine. I think a lot of people, particularly people of my age and older, like paper copies. However, they can be burned up in fire. And even digitized copies can be corrupted by viruses or lost when your computer crashes or whatever. So that's not a typo on the slide. Make copies, make copies. No matter if you have paper copies, go put it in a bank vault somewhere. If you have a digitized version, put it on a couple of 3 thumb drives and just keep them in different places, because you don't want to lose all of that hard work that you've done. Trust me, been there and done that. There's also a very good reason for digitizing your interviews. So if you can transcribe from audio onto paper and then put that into a Word format, I'll show you in a minute why that's a very useful thing to do. And again, beware of the battle fatigue. If you're bringing all this stuff out into the open, it's painful. There's just no other way around it. And the longer you spend in this time of your trauma, it's going to wear you out. So take your time, get with those people in your support group that can restore vigor and vitality to you, and encourage you and listen to you. That's just, I can't stress enough how important that is in each phase of this process to do. So now, as you've done your research and you know essentially where you want to go ahead and let that begin to take shape. I don't know if everyone learned how to create outlines in high school. That was actually one of my favorite things to do in English. I wasn't particularly good at grammar, but boy, I could nail that outline. And it really is useful. I think Edgar Allan Poe had in writing his short stories, he would start with the end first. If you're going to do something that's short, I would advise that. It's actually a really good idea. And we'll talk about in the editing process how going back and forth from one, as you're editing, going forward, then going backwards, starting in the middle. There's a really good reason why you do that. But as you are taking all this raw data from your research and trying to put it into a coherent narrative, the outline is going to be your best friend. So once on paper, you've kind of got, okay, this is I want an intro. Chapter 1 is going to be da-da-da-da-da, chapter 2. And I think I'm probably going to have 10 chapters by the time it's all said and done. Put headlines on each of the chapters. I would actually recommend that you open up a Word document and do your outline there. And now if you're old school like me and you love a good yellow legal pad, okay, great. But at some point, you need to get onto that Word document, because this is going to help you. It's going to help simplify quite a few things. If you open up this document and begin inserting page breaks and using that as your blank chapter headings, okay, you should have an idea of how long this is going to be. Now, you may say, "Oh, I'll never write anything over 100 pages." Trust me, it'll surprise you how quickly this thing will get away from you. And particularly if you're carrying this project over, multiple months or even years, and the more comes to your mind and the more comes out of your heart onto the page, it's going to grow, and it's going to grow and grow. And before long, you'll have a 500-page monstrosity like I did. Well, I come to find out, if I wanted to publish this thing, almost everyone, unless you're a writer whose name rhymes with Kevin Sting, most publishers don't want anything over 300 pages. If you're talking about biographical nonfiction, narrative nonfiction, even fiction, they just don't want something that's long or so long that a reader is not going to pick it up. Now, of course, Stephen King, man, he can write 1,000 pages on it and The Stand and all that, and I will lap it up. But be honest with yourself. Is someone going to want to read 300 pages or 1,000 pages of what you write, what I write? No, obviously not. I mean, unless you do have the talent of Stephen King, and if you do, man, go for it. But you got to get, yeah, even he had to be discovered first, you know what I'm saying? And that took decades. So I would advise against shooting for a 250 to 300 page length. Now you can start breaking that down. If you have 10 chapters, then you can say, all right, each chapter has got to be 25 to 30 pages. That actually seems doable, doesn't it? That's more like, if you think about writing a book, it can be very daunting. But if you break it up into bite-sized pieces, like the advice for eating an elephant, or in Tom's case, a cow, just one bite at a time. So now that you've got this outline done, you've broken your document into blank chapter headings, and okay, let's shoot for 20 to 25 pages for this chapter, and we'll just start writing to that. It makes it seem more within your grasp. And you know what? When you think about it, I think just about every project that you undertake, you'll find success in life the more that you try not to do too much. You know, just kind of take it one step at a time, break it down into smaller parts, accomplish a small task, which gives you the encouragement to take on even larger tasks. I think I read from a Green Beret a few years back that said, if you want to change the world, start by making your bed. You know, small task, it brings great sense of accomplishment to you and encouragement, and then, man, you're just going to bigger and better things beyond just making your bed. And that, I guess, that's what we're talking about here. Just start with small, you know, write a page, and then write two, you know. So here's another. Oh, remember we talked about your digitized research. This is where this comes into play. Once you have the transcripts of your interviews and all the other research that you've done, you can start cutting and pasting that stuff into the chapter to which it belongs. This will be a very useful reference point for you for filling out the chapter. You don't have to go back and forth. You just kind of, okay, it's already in this document, and I'll put this here. Sergeant Berkman said this, that goes here, and it will help you kind of sort things out as you're putting pen to paper. Now, remember, we haven't even really begun the writing process. This is just getting ready to write, and it's going to help. Now, another thing that you can do that will help during the writing process, also into this document, I would build your title page, an introduction page, an acknowledgements page, epilogue, prologue, whatever you're going to put into this thing, right? But already have it with the headings where they go. Why is this important? Perhaps you have heard of such a thing as writer's block. Imagine if you're a writer who is trying to write about an event that your subconscious mind desperately does not want you to remember. You know, that makes writer's block look like child's play. It's like having, it's like trying to write on 3 different computers that you're juggling and they're all on fire, okay? When this overcomes you, when you have these moments of writer's block or fugue, or things are just particularly bothering you, you can continue forward movement through this obstacle by taking a break from the hard bits of the narrative that are causing you problems and going to the title page. Well, you're still doing something while you let your lizard brain process things out a little bit more, and then you can come back to it later. That's what I did. It seemed to work, even though it took me only 10 years to get the blasted thing done. Now it's time to write. Okay, young Hemingway, Steinbeck, this is where the rubber meets the road. The punk rock method here, I don't know if you've ever listened to a punk rock song before, but they're generally all the same. 1, 2, 3, go, see you at the end. Over in 30 seconds, right? Man, I would highly recommend that you get all the momentum you can and just put this stuff out on the paper as quick as it will go. Even stream of consciousness writing, where you're just not even thinking about what's going to the paper. You just start somewhere and just let that hand do your bidding. Do you write it out longhand? Okay, try that. Do you want an old-fashioned typewriter like Stephen King liked to use? Myself, I like the computer. So whatever your chosen method of getting the thoughts out onto the printed page, go at it. But just go at it like you're going to bust through the ambush, and write what you feel, no matter what it might be, for as long as you can take it. When you do, it's important that you take a break, go find that support network, go get with your therapist, and stay healthy. Okay, if this traumatic event is still so raw for you that you notice the first time you start to write about it that you completely break down, okay, you may want to break contact for a little bit. However, writing, tell you, it is one of the best modes of therapy that that you can get for this. Okay, but yes, take frequent breaks. Don't worry about being perfect. Just get it out of you. That's what the editing process is for. This is kind of like scribbling on the paper. I think Elizabeth did a fantastic job of bringing that out. Don't worry about perfection. Worry about the scribbling. Worry about the feel of things, and try not to even worry so much about making sure all of the everything in the timeline is correct. Just write. Now, I am not a professional writer. It's not my job. Matter of fact, of all the people presenting today, I am probably the least qualified to talk to you about writing at a professional level or any kind of level. It's just something I enjoy to do. I love to do it, but I'm not particularly skilled at it. Okay, I would highly recommend. This is just my thought. Okay, be yourself. If you speak a certain way, everyone has that voice in their head that they listen to, perfectly not telling you to kill the cat or something, but that voice in your head, write that voice. Who cares if it doesn't sound like Steinbeck or whatever, and flowery in its prose? Who cares? I mean, if you're not writing to have this published, what does it matter anyway? I'm sure that your loved ones who you'll let read it eventually will absolutely love what it is that you have to say. They just want to hear what's going on inside you because they care about you. Now, if you are an English professor, if English is your thing, man, go for it. Write like that. But I'm willing to bet most of you are like me. You're not an English, or you're not an Arthur. You're not an author type person. You're just a normal guy who's trying to tell a story. I actually think it comes off better when we're as genuine as we can possibly be. Okay, don't worry about using big words. Don't worry about coming across as someone who can write well. Just as I said at the beginning, try not to take yourself so seriously. Just relax, take a breath, enjoy it. Don't be someone who goes to the buffet and just crams all the food down your throat. Be someone who goes to the table and samples each bite and enjoys the process of eating, just because it's enjoyable. The writing can be so enjoyable if you just take your time at it and let it come. Be yourself. Now, if naturally you have the vocabulary of an English professor, okay, use it. Go ahead. But in all cases, I think it works better. It's more, people can identify, can relate better to what you're writing if it's just coming from the heart, and just let it sound like what it's going to sound like. That's at this stage. And when we get to the editing portion of it, we'll have a few more words to say there. Okay. So, what about this lizard brain thing I have here? Well, I believe it's the hippocampus in your brain that handles the fight or flight responses. It handles the survival mode portion of your brain. And I think that is called the lizard brain. That is the portion that's just, it's animal, and it wants to keep you safe. And the lizard brain will not like you when you start to dig around in there to pull things out into the light to deal with, because it's going to automatically kick up those responses, like your heart rate, your breathing, as you begin to remember the bad things that happen to you in your life. That's just your brain doing what your brain is supposed to do. You are not, there's nothing wrong with you. There is nothing abnormal about you. Matter of fact, I would say that post-traumatic stress disorder is just a normal response to an abnormal event. So your brain is going to try to rebel against you. It did me, trust me. And if you can just summon the resources within yourself to tell that thing to take a hike, then you can carry on. But as I said before, take breaks. Go and see your support network. In every stage of the process, it is so important to maintain good mental health. Okay. Yeah. Once you've hit your goal for the day, maybe you set, let's say for the week, I'm going to try to write 5 pages. That's 1 page a day. Set that goal, accomplish it, and then rest. You know, that's just my advice. Now, I've included down at the bottom here. This is from the Psalms in the Bible. This was written by King David, the warrior. In my searching through the scripture for answers about what was going on inside of me, I was struck by how much of the Psalms seems to be written by someone who suffers from PTSD like I did. And if you read this, man, isn't it just there? Do you recognize any of that in yourself? How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? Man, how long must I wrestle in my soul with sorrow in my heart each day? Man, this was just me. And this is just one particular selection of many. I can guarantee you that King David, after all the combat that he saw, he struggled with these issues too. So you're not alone. But just look at what all that trauma in his life, what he was able to produce onto the page. Man, this is beautiful. It is beautiful. And I have a analogy I'd like to share with you. There's a form of Japanese pottery, and I forget the name for it, but it is the process of taking broken bits of ceramic and joining. Maybe Tom Morrissey can help me out on this. The process of joining these broken pieces of pottery together with gold. And by the time you get done, yes, it's broken, but the product after the mending is more beautiful than it was before. And I see this in the writing here. And I know that it's possible for all of my brothers and sisters who struggle with PTSD from not only military service, but sometimes bad things happen just beyond that, right? Now, stop there if you don't intend to do anything else with the work. If this was just to get it out onto paper, then by all means, just put the thing out there as quick as you can and leave it. You have accomplished your task. High five on the objective, okay? Now, we're going into the sculpting process, and the reason why we're going to stop here is because this is what you do if you want to have your writing published, okay? And the reason why I want to have you stop here is because now you're going to begin to edit this thing until death seems like sweet, sweet mercy. And it is painful. It will not be over quickly. It is painstaking, to say the least, okay? And absolutely, when you're going at it, you have to divorce yourself from how much you love to hear yourself write, okay? Some people are in love with the sound of their own voice, and they'll sing just at the drop of a hat. Some people just love to hear themselves talk. Some people love to hear themselves write, and actually, that's a good thing. If you're writing and you enjoy what is coming out of you, fantastic. That is appropriate to the art and process of writing. However, when it's time to refine it, you have to kill your ego. You absolutely have to fall out of love with what you have just written. If you don't, you will not be effective at editing this thing. Yeah, like I said, pretend you are your ex-wife and be as critical about your writing as your ex-wife would be, okay, or your ex-husband. The emotional aspect of writing, the enjoyment that you got out of it, that's a thing of the past. It's time to clean up the mistakes, fix all those run-on sentences and everything that spell check says you've misspelled. And Tom was very wise in pointing out earlier that spell check does not catch everything. But in your first run through, it's a pretty good, I guess it's a pretty good backstop to figure out, where to start. But it's only the first time through there. It's called a rough draft for a reason. And you may make it through the first edit and fix all those red underlines, but that's just the beginning of your task. Now you have to go back through and read it after you've done your first edit, okay? And the rule of thumb is, if it sounds awkward to you as you read it out loud. If it still sounds awkward, then it is awkward. Fix it. It's not a sin, it's not a crime to delete something that it took you 5 minutes to figure out how to write, okay? The point is the enjoyment of the writing, right? So don't be in love with it. If it doesn't work, this is what editing is for. I'm of the school of thought, Tom kind of mentioned the difference between Hemingway's short prose and the more flowery, let's say, of a J.R.R. Tolkien or like that. Well, my thinking of it is longer is not better. Just say what you say, get to the point. If someone is trying to read through a combat narrative at a minimum, it's unpleasant reading and they want to get through it as quickly as possible, just like you wanted to get through the actual event as quickly as possible, okay? Just keep in mind that when you're inviting someone into your space to experience your trauma, if you've done your writing well, they're going to experience it just like you did, and it's going to be uncomfortable for them. So my advice would be the less time they spend wandering around in your brain, the better off everybody's going to be. There's good advice about not exceeding your vocabulary. I had a drill sergeant in basic who spoke about something called unisys. I still have no idea what that is. Apparently in the officer realm, they speak of things called planification. Okay, just simple is better. Try not to use words that you definitely don't use a word that you don't know what it means, because that will become readily apparent to everyone else as well. Now, once you've completed the edit, it is time to start at the end and work backwards. That's right. You have to, just like playing a country music song backwards, you get your house back, your car back, your wife back, your dog back. We start at the end and work to the beginning. Why is that? Because by the time you've been through the process of writing it, you've been through the first edit, your brain is going to have a tendency to say, oh, everything's fine, nothing to see here, and you're going to rush through it and miss the things that you should be looking for because you've already trained your brain not to see them. And the way we get around that is you start at the end of the thing and work backwards, and that now your brain is not going to trip you up or be less inclined to trip you up by doing that. And then when you get done doing that, read it again. And at this point, you are not to be trusted with your own product, okay? You've already gone through it so many times that it's just going, everything that you're missing is still glancing off of that glorious bald dome of yours. So you need to find someone else, a disinterested third party, to look at it for you. Now, don't give it to your mom. Your mom will say, oh, it's so good, this is just the best ever, and she'll put it on a refrigerator with a magnet. Do not listen to your mother, and unless your mother's a horrible human being, then maybe. Family members make poor editors, okay? Best friends make poor editors. Go ahead and let them read it if you want to, but just know that a person who will tell you the ugly truth about yourself is a rare individual. I found a person like that, and I married her. She tells me the truth no matter if I want to hear it or if it hair lips the Pope, she's going to tell me. Yeah, I would strongly recommend finding a random English student, some fresh-faced 20-year-old kid that is trying to make a little extracurricular work by doing some editing on the side, even pay them, pizza or whatever. Now, the goal of all this is to get your draft, your manuscript, into a form that is as error-free as humanly possible. Because if you take something that is a freshly polished turd and try to send it to an editor, the very first time that they see that you've used there, and there wrong, they're just going to put it in the trash bin and not look at it beyond that. So do them a favor, do yourself a favor, and put in the hard work of getting this thing polished up as best you can. So once you've done that, you, my friend, are ready to send out your query letters. I should have done this bit of research before coming here, but I chose a site called Editors and Predators. Basically, they have a list of all publishers in the United States, and they give feedback on the ones that are just trying to scam you out of your money, and the ones that are legit, or any systemic complaints that might have been lodged against said editors. They do them for all 50 states, all major publishing houses. This was the resource that I used to figure out where to send the query letter to. What is a query letter? Well, basically it is, and this is a process for narrative nonfiction, okay? The process may be slightly different for fiction. In fact, I think it is. If you're sending it to an editor that specializes in that kind of thing. But in the narrative nonfiction and nonfiction in general, I believe, but the query letter is a good way to get the attention of an editor to see if they're even interested in going further with you. And the basic format, and this is the original one that I sent out, and you just find the email address. Most of them use email now, although a lot of the OG, they'll use snail mail. But I just exclusively sent them out email just for sake of quickness. So the query letter, it kind of lets the editor know this is the kind of story that I have. This is the elevator pitch of what happened. They actually even get a little bit of glimpse into your writing ability when you do this query letter. So it's a good thing to make it error-free as well. If there's just blatant misspelled words in this letter, you've done yourself no service whatsoever. And they also want to know how you qualify to speak about or to write about what you did. If you have any prior success in publishing, I think a great way to decide or to kind of beef up your resume a little bit is to go for the small fish first. If you can get onto, you can write a magazine article, if you can write a newspaper article, anything that you can write and get published in black and white print is going to stand in your favor and just adds to your resume. But anyway, the editors want to know how you fit into the story, and they're going to see if it's a right fit for the kind of things they're looking to publish. And I will tell you, out of I think 200 such queries that I sent, I didn't get a hit on any except for one. So I had several like, oh, well, this does sound interesting. Would you send a proposal along? Which is what we're going to talk about next. Proposal. This is a quote from my friend Erin, who was my mentor. Okay, she said, everyone goes into proposals thinking, not so bad. I already wrote the book. This will be easy. Am I right? And by the end, you'd rather just write the book all over again than do the proposal. Proposal can be very mind-numbing. If you're interested in this, friend me on Facebook or go to Lancer Legacy Ranch, their Facebook page, and message me, and I will send you 3 examples from other people that have had successful proposals to give you an idea of the different ways to attack it. There's really no wrong way to do it except making it too long. Start with something that will grab their attention, and that needs to be some writing from your manuscript that you think is particularly good. Hit them with the best shot you got right out of the gate. Then you want to break down your book chapter by chapter and write a short summary of each one. Give them the elevator pitch for your book. We're talking about just, hey, you got 5 minutes to convince them that this is a good investment of their resources. So just hit them with the basic facts of the book. They also need to know why you're the one that's qualified to write this particular tale, and what work did you do to get it to this point. This is something peculiar to nonfiction, because they want to make sure that you're not feeding them a line, that you're not engaged in stolen valor, that you're not otherwise telling a big old fishing tale. Then you'll want to provide another sample of your writing that kind of shows what you can do and what your talent is, and if it's going to be a fit with their publishing house, and wrap it up and make the case, leave them with something strong. Now, the big thing that they need to take away from your proposal, how is this work different from every other work on the subject that I've seen? What makes yours stand out? The one thing I heard over and over again, hey, it's another story about Iraq, and everyone's just kind of, everyone's war weary about it. They don't hear about Iraq anymore. So why do they want to hear about your book? What's special about your particular take on this? And this was, it became more true later on. Martha Raddatz, she wrote a book about the same event called The Long Road Home, and she did a fantastic job with it. Well, now that the question becomes, there's 2 different books about this event. What makes yours stand out? Why is yours different? Perhaps in music, you've heard of something called the hook. Well, they have the same thing in the nonfiction world as well. What's the so what of this? You know, okay, it's another war story. So what? Why should I read this one as opposed to Platoon or something else? Well, you have to figure out how to answer that question. And if you've done your work at the beginning when we talked about strategizing, why are you writing this book? Why is this going to be different than any other tale? Then when you get to the proposal and you've done the editing process in such a way that they can now see this is how it truly stands out. All right. So anyway, if you're interested in proposals, I can send you some. Now, choosing a publisher. Here is a list of questions that you can ask yourself to figure out what kind of publishing house is going to be right for you. Are you already famous? i.e., are you a member of Congress? Are you a president? Are you a movie star or someone that people already know? Or are you famous for writing lots of books already? Well, if that's the case, Penguin Publishing or some big name house like that is they'll pay you $1 million advance on your book. If not, are you at least a Medal of Honor recipient or Marcus Luttrell or equivalent? Again, that kind of goes back to, are you already famous? The bottom line is there are only so many books that a publishing house is going to look at. And if it's someone that regularly makes the New York Times bestseller list, well, there's a reason why the industry is set up that way. There are hundreds upon hundreds of books sent to these publishing houses on a daily, and they can only publish so many in a given year, and they're looking for the ones that they know are going to make them the most money. And so they equate already celebrity status or previously held celebrity status with their chances of making a good bit of money on your work. If you perhaps were in a famous battle, okay, you have a better chance of getting published. If people like your writing, well, okay, now you're at the level that unless you write really, really well and it just catches someone out of left field, most likely what you're going to be left with is self-publishing or Amazon publishing, so-called vanity publishers that you have to pay for out of pocket to make it happen. So that's kind of the reality check here. Unless there is a tie-in for your story to something that is in the current here and now, where people are actually interested in finding out, excuse me, about your story, the likelihood that you're going to make it to a big publisher is pretty small, and you just have to be aware of that and adjust your expectations accordingly. This doesn't mean that you don't write well. It doesn't mean that your story is not really, really good. What it means is that the people who actually have their work brought out and receive the recognition that it deserves is very, very small. So we'll talk about some things that you can do marketing-wise that might raise your chances of having that happen. So the publication process itself, if you do make it that far, is pretty grueling. But my advice all throughout, read your contract. Read the contract. If you've done the work, you've done the edit, you've sent out the query, they liked what they saw, they wanted to see a proposal, the proposal won them over, and now you move to publication. They're going to send you a contract, and it will behoove you to take that contract apart and maybe take it to a lawyer and make sure you understand it. The bottom line is their job is to retain as many of the rights as they possibly can. And a lot of those rights that you're agreeing to give to the publishing house are just kind of industry standard. There's really no other way around it. But if you can keep the right for yourself, I think the one that most of them didn't really care about at least 5 years ago was I'm drawing a blank here, y'all. It's audio books. Most of them didn't really care if you retain those rights or not. So whatever the contract turns out to be, read it carefully. You're signing on the dotted line and you're agreeing to meet certain deadlines. It's now the editor's job to, if you think you've got everything just right, well, guess what? The editor is going to find stuff you wouldn't have caught in a million years. It's their job, it's what they're good at, and they will catch it. And if they ask you to fix something, you've just signed a contract agreeing that you will fix it. So that goes hand in hand. And you may think, oh, this is my baby, this is my product. Well, no, that's once you agreed to have it published, you're giving up a lot of control. So if you're a control-oriented person, well, this is just the reality that you're in for. Okay, it's your baby, but they've left the nest now. They're all grown up, you know. So just try to be at peace with that as much as you possibly can, and be as prompt in fixing what the editor asks for as soon as they ask for it. They really appreciate that. The deadlines are there for a reason, and if you don't meet the deadlines, you can be in default. And if you've got an advance, if they do that kind of thing, you're in trouble. You got to pay it back. So read the contract carefully. Matter of fact, they can change even the title of it if they feel so led. Just understand that that's what you're signing up for. Now, as far as the marketing goes, let's say that this is important for the big publishing houses as much as it is for even a vanity publishing. Okay, just the approach is going to be a little bit different. The publisher wants to make a lot of money on your book, so they're going to market it as best as they can with the budget that they have. If you're an unproven quantity, they're not going to put as much time or as much money into it. There are plenty of other works that they have going on, but they do have a vested interest in seeing you succeed. But let me tell you something, nobody has more interest in seeing you succeed than you do. So you need to make yourself as available to promote as you possibly can. If they do manage to get you speaking engagements. And if you're terrified of public speaking, get over it. You just need to do it. Whether it's book signings or radio interviews, TV interviews, the best marketing is free marketing. And if you can get on like a local TV station to talk about your book, they're not going to charge you, and people get to see it. There are online marketing services. I'm thinking particularly of Amazon. If you do an Amazon published book, just understand that they're kind of a fire and forget sort of thing. You know, they're not really going to do anything except mass mail people and spam people's email, Facebook, that sort of thing. But you do have social media of your own. Build your friends list and tear that thing up. Personally, I don't use Twitter. I guess I'm just a crotchety old man, get off my yard kind of guy, and I never picked it up. But you youngins, you might want to get a Twitter account, and I don't know, Snapchat, is that a thing now still? Anyway, so you can see how social media has revolutionized my publishing life. Anyway, it does help to use social media to your advantage, particularly in the age of self-publishing. I truly believe that the big publishing houses are going to be a thing of the past, and there's much more prevalent access to self-publishing and good, cheap publishing options, print on demand, that kind of thing, than there was in the past, and probably where everything is heading. So, and if you can get your work into the right hands, let's say your uncle on your mom's side knows someone in TV, you know, work those connections, you know, work your network. If the right person finds your book, then who knows how well it might do. So, and really appreciate you guys getting this out with me. I know this is all, you know, no breaks and everything, but we're just about done here. Now, know your rights. Did you read the contract? Well, read it. If someone from Hollywood comes knocking, you need to treat them like a dirty diaper or like UXO, man. Just understand that you can't trust anyone from Hollywood, no matter how well-meaning, no matter how sincere they seem. They don't care about you. They don't care about your book. The only thing that they care about is their project, and they're going to try to get away with as much as they can and give you as little as possible. That's just how it is. But retain every right that you can. Make sure that you get it in writing. If the Hollywood studio that is interested in your story, they want to use your work, get it in writing. Because if you don't, you have absolutely no recourse whenever they take something that you wrote, use it, and don't give you any credit for it. How do I know? Experience. So just anticipate that you're going to get screwed, and when it happens, it's not a big deal, because life is all about managing those expectations. If you expect that someone's going to try to, you know, pull a fast one on you, and they do, it doesn't make you mad. So let's talk a little bit about PTSD. That is the end of the writing portion. So let's talk about PTSD a little bit. As you can imagine, relating the story that I just told you, that was our third day in theater, and I was around for 215 combat missions after that one. Let me tell you, I had PTSD pretty bad for 12 years. That was the beginning. And I can tell you right now that I don't have it at all. I was healed of it 3 years and 2 weeks ago. And I'll tell you all about it sometime. But I want to ask you, how has PTSD affected your life? Maybe you've never even really thought about it. But if you've experienced a very significant traumatic event, and you know, war, as we said, is just one thing, but it could be a host of different traumas. If you've had an intense response to that event, such as fear or helplessness, if you live this event over and over again when you don't really want to, i.e., flashbacks, dreams. I had the same dream every night for about 10 years. It was horrible. And my ex-wife now, she called me a robot because I had no emotional response whatsoever. I would avoid anything that reminded me of it. Those triggers that we talk about, and I'd avoid them like the plague. And I would actually detach myself from daily activities and the normal things I used to love. I no longer had any feeling for whatsoever. I think sleep loss is one of the biggest and most common symptoms among sufferers of PTSD. Inability to control or regulate your emotions by having anger. Concentrating was huge for me, and being just super vigilant all the time, thinking that the worst is about to happen. You know, always having to be in a restaurant with your back to the wall and with the eyes on the door and all that kind of thing. And startle responses. Some people, you know, the fireworks at 4th of July set them off. Some people they don't. And there's a lot of social impairment that comes along with this. So if you've read through this and you identify with it, then perhaps you need to see someone about getting some PTSD treatment. I will tell you that there is a lie out there that says that once you have PTSD, you're stuck with it for the rest of your life. Not true. And I can tell you this with a straight face, because when I say I was healed 3 years ago, I was. Absolutely, totally, and completely. 1 year after I was healed, I actually went down to Fort Hood to watch the filming of the Long Road Home, and they were filming the bit where my gunner gets killed, and so I get to see myself, this guy that played me, trying to help Sergeant Chin and failing, take after take after take, man, all day long watching that. And you know what? I had a normal emotional response. I cried because that's appropriate and normal. And when I went to bed that night in the hotel room, slept like a baby. You know, that to me, if that's not going to shake me, nothing will. So I can tell you from certainty and absolute confidence that PTSD is not a death sentence. Okay. Now, in 2015, once I got out of the Army, we started Lancer Legacy Ranch. So we started Lancer Legacy Ranch. Lancer because we were founded by Task Force Lancer survivors, mostly guys in my old platoon. Legacy because of the 6 men who died saving my life that day and gave me a second chance. And that's a whole nother story in itself. So Legacy, we're honoring our brothers and sisters who fell in the theater of conflict. And Ranch because it's a place of we're trying to achieve self-sustainability through different things like livestock and power generation and green initiatives like that. So that's kind of the genesis of where we got started. It was on my property in Cookeville, Texas, back in 2015 with just an RV. But we had an opportunity 2 years later to move into this is version 2 of Lancer. We moved into an abandoned restitution center, which is a fancy word for jail. And it had been empty since 2011. And they were just letting us use the building rent free for a year. They paid the utility bills, and we had all this space now to help out veterans that needed the place to be. This was a godsend to us, you know, and instead of just having one person on a weekend in an RV, now we can have we've had as many as 18 staying here at one time. What a tremendous opportunity to help out our brothers and sisters. This is in Maud, Texas. That is west of Texarkana, approximately 23 miles. It is out in the country, and that's actually a really good setting for people with PTSD that are trying to get back into life. We have people stay out here that are from every situation you can imagine. Many that have been homeless, drug addicts, alcoholics, people going through separations from their significant others. and guys who just eat up with PTSD and trying to find out what comes next in life. We've seen literally every scenario you can imagine. Some of the programs that we have, you can see on the screen here, we do primarily housing. We have a lot of transition that goes along with that. We'll take in someone for 30 days. We'll assess what their needs are and how we're going to get them back into life. We come up with a plan that is going to individually help them overcome their obstacles, whatever they might be. You can't treat a veteran, and you guys know this very well, you can't treat a veteran like every other veteran, because we're, at the end of the day, even though we have a common set of experiences, we're individuals and we have individual problems. The reason why I have a problem with drinking may be PTSD, or it may be just I'm an alcoholic, you know, because you can't just cookie cutter the response. We do PTSD therapy through Operation Reboot. I'm a peer counselor, but we also have access to therapists in the community that are willing to offer their services for free. We do a lot of peer groups and exercise, and the things that you see here that are highlighted are what we're currently doing, and the ones that are not in bold are planned programs that we're bringing online as the qualified personnel and resources arrive. So we're also big into sustainability. We have a garden out here, greenhouse. We're looking to do aquaponics. Right now we just have chickens, but I think next month we're going to have calves as well. We're looking to get solar panels put on the roof and a well put in. Essentially, in 5 years, we want to be as self-sustained as possible, so we don't have to worry about chasing donations and all that. We teach skills out here. Our signature program is bladesmithing. We're close to the premier knife making academy in the world, so that's kind of a plus. Veteran outreach, we have access to different veteran groups that offer fishing, hunting, outdoor adventures. We do a lot of seminars. We participate in the local veteran fairs. And we also started American Legion Post 161 that was formed here at the ranch to support the ranch and veterans. We're involved in community engagement. We feed senior citizens every Friday. We have access to a food bank, which we're able to get food out to veterans in the community. We build wheelchair ramps for veterans that need it, or do landscaping for veterans that can't get around anymore. And we also have the community center named after Robert Ray Arciaga that is open to the public every day. So you can, okay. If you want to make a difference in what we're doing here, our current budget is $5,200 a month. We are entirely staffed by volunteers. Nobody gets paid for doing what we do out here. This is because we have a second chance and we're just trying to give back. So if you want to be a part of that, we're trying to get to the point where we can hire full-time staff, because obviously that's better, but that's a huge jump in our monthly income. The only sources of funding for us are small donations from individuals and businesses. We don't take any grants. We're not funded by the state. We're doing this at a grassroots level. So if the COVID's got you down and all you can do is sponsors for $10 a month, great. That'll go a long way. But we invite you to join the legacy and become part of our goal of becoming self-sustaining by October 1st, 2024. This has been my great pleasure to present this to you. Are there any questions?